What is the experience of traveling to a world that is bound to perish? Lynch said he doesn't want to know. He not only traveled to a world of despair, but also reached the forefront of resisting demons, becoming cannon fodder in a bloody battle with demons, a lizard. Lizard Man Lynch accepted this well, and the supervising demon toad satisfactorily dispersed the destructive storm on Lynch's head. You have been selected, go and deliver it quickly. Lynch looked at his enemy, and the restless rat man poked out his ugly head underground. At a glance, there were chaotic claws everywhere. The dark elves execute prisoners on the coast, while the undead act recklessly at sea. The ancient plan has failed, with no allies, only enemies. The end is coming. Wait a minute, why is there still a fellow villager across from you? Lynch looked at the Prince of Nagu and invited himself to join the Chaos Walker, raising his spear. Group wearing, group portrait, single protagonist, war theme, main battle, cold-blooded logic, pure order side, no male-female relationship, no farming, non-human race protagonist, do not like to enter keywords of the novel. Starting from the Lizard Man, Mang Chuan in the Middle Ages with no pop-ups, starting from the Lizard Man, Mang Chuan in the Middle Ages. Download the complete set of TXT, and starting from the Lizard Man, Mang Chuan in the Middle Ages. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Lynch of Ruthenia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Lynch of Ruthenia, the ancient Luskia, resembling the continent of South America. There are magnificent pyramids hidden in the tall rainforest. The species resembling an upright lizard drives dinosaurs and roams the wide streets. Deep underground in the pyramid, the clear pool is filled with tadpole-like creatures that prey on insects. Every once in a while, hundreds of tadpole-like creatures transform into lizards and hatch out. Another group of newly born lizards, among these sturdy monsters that even bend down half a head taller than humans, one lizard person who is out of place with his own kind is exceptionally prominent. Lynch looked stealthily at the underground atoll, following his fellow brothers towards the nearby arsenal. As a stranger familiar with this world, Lynch, after the initial panic and novelty had passed, was only left with sadness. Firstly, Lynch became a member of the Sunset Race Lizard Man. Moreover, he is the Thuras of the warrior class. At the time of the arrival of the ancient sage, these extraterrestrial visitors transformed local species to assist them in completing their mysterious grand plan. The toad-like Ceylon was their assistant, but their bodies were too fragile, so the ancient sage created the sauropod Thuras, who was born specifically for combat. The ancient sage needed some clever laborers, so the short and agile spirit lizard Skank was born. Obviously, for these planet shapers, labor is also essential, and the giant lizard Kraxiger has emerged. Under the command of the ancient sage, temple cities have risen one after another, and local species have been transformed and optimized. Countless lizard troops have been sent to eliminate species that do not meet the big plan in the local area. The assistant of the ancient sage, the powerful first-generation Ceylon, brought the distance between the sun and the planet closer. The environment of the planet has become more suitable for mortals, but creatures such as dragons have also been forced to sleep due to temperature changes. The second generation of Ceylon forged the continent, shaping it into plates similar to those of various continents on Earth. The barren world has become prosperous, ready to thrive according to schedule. Everything comes to an end in a disaster. The shadow of subspace noticed this world, and one night, the portals at both poles collapsed, and an unparalleled chaotic force flooded into this planet. The ancient sage also disappeared overnight. They may have escaped, after all, the great power of the Chaos Four Gods cannot be defied. It is also possible that they engaged in intense needlework with the chaotic gods at a latitude invisible to mortals. In the chaotic realm where time had lost its meaning, the ancient sage was ultimately slaughtered by the power of chaos. In summary, this world is left with only lizard humans who have lost their guides, as well as races such as elves, dwarves, and humans that have been transformed and optimized by the ancient sages. Endless demons emerge from both ends, and as the first guardian, the lizard man shoulders the task of initially fighting against chaos. But even biological weapons require process and time to manufacture, but demons do not. In the chaotic demon realm, the number of demons is so high that even numbers cannot be summarized. Although the lizard man has gained an advantage in most battles, chaotic demons continue to emerge from the subspace. This is a battle that must be defeated. Temple cities were destroyed one after another, and thousands of years of war led the lizard empire into dusk. If given a choice, Lynch would rather cross over and become an ordinary human. After the first chaotic invasion was repelled, the Luskian rainforest had become a dangerous forbidden area. From time to time, demons break through the barriers that protect the world and come to Luskia, continuing their eternal war. Some ignorant new species have also developed a desire for gold in the rainforest, not to mention the hatred of evil gods and creations towards lizard people. From birth, lizards are destined to be companions of war, and the vast majority of lizards cannot live for a few years, even if they theoretically live for a long time. The lizard people who survive the battle will gain more resilient scales and stronger physique over time. Every Scar veteran has gone through centuries, even thousands of years of combat. If it weren't for external help, Lynch really wouldn't know how many years he had left to live. Perhaps he will be sent to the front line to fight against demons and die in eternal holy war. Perhaps he encountered a rat man while patrolling in the forest, and after some fighting, he managed to survive, but also encountered a dark elf searching for treasure for Lynch. This is the beginning of a nightmare. The chattering spirit lizard distributed spears and shields to the lizards, and Lynch's mournful face puzzled the spirit lizard who distributed weapons to him. It has never seen a lizard with such a strange posture before. As cold-blooded warriors, they rarely have any emotions other than bloodthirsty. Lynch noticed the gaze of the spirit lizard, and his face instantly turned into the paralyzed face of an ordinary lizard. He is not sure if his discovery will attract Slan's attention. This kind of crossing may not be able to deceive powerful mages who can move mountains and seas. If he were to be treated as a detective of evil gods and strange things, he would suffer. The spirit lizard looked left and right for a while, then bounced and ran too busy with other things. Lynch breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, silently and instinctively forming a battle formation with his fellow countrymen. This was the battle experience written into the lizard gene by the ancient sage. Lynch adapted to his body while following the lizards up the stone steps, walking out of the pyramid to the wide square on the ground. During this process, Lynch vaguely saw several streams of data in front of him. They write in the script of the lizard man. Current potential development rate 10, not selected for strengthening renovation. Lynch's attention was focused on the text, and information related to reinforcement and transformation flooded into his mind. Scaled armor enhancement, magical rune inscriptions, color-changing ability transformation, supernatural restorative power. A series of modifications and enhancements made Lynch envious, but when he selected supernatural resilience enhancement, a cold line of text emerged. Not severely damaged, unable to transform, Lynch chose one by one, but it was all this prompt. Must suffer heavy damage in order to transform. Does this mean that one must go through a fight to improve oneself? Does giving oneself a spear count? Lynch was a bit eager to try, but he was afraid that he might not control his strength well and just played himself to death. A spirit lizard riding a triceratops and wearing a feather crown stopped the lizard people like Lynch. Lord Wakur has issued an order. Go to the rainforest to the east and kill those elves who have crossed over. Amidst the sharp cries, Lynch followed his fellow brothers along the main road and walked out of the temple city. At least 4/5 of Luskia is covered by dense forests, and multiple layers of tree canopies can even cover shorter mountain ranges. The lizards silently roamed through the moss, while spirit lizard hunters occasionally wandered through the vines hanging on the ground. Lynch held the shield and spear, feeling as if there was a dark elf crossbowman hidden behind the tall mushroom ahead. But this is obviously impossible. After all, this place is not far from the temple city and is still under the control of the lizard man. Newcomer's new book, please follow up. Not following the reading will really lead to being razed to death. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Hometown Knows. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Hometown knows. Along the way, neither the spiny-backed dragon hunting in the swamp nor the Tyrannosaurus rex driving away the Ankylosaurus group came to trouble the lizards like Lynch. The various mosquitoes in the rainforest were unable to bite through the armor like scales, and Lynch walked steadily along the way. As Lynch approached the beach, a series of messages came to mind. It reminds Lynch to use trees to hide his body and be prepared for possible enemy counterattacks. Lynch and the other lizards crawled silently before finally stopping in the bushes by the beach. Through the cracks in the branches and leaves, Lynch could see hundreds of elf swordsmen wearing leather armor, as well as some marksmen holding elf crossbows. They laughed heartily and surrounded a group of bound humans. There are two ships parked on the coast, one is a human merchant ship, and the other is a pirate ship used by dark elf pirates to plunder. The god of slaughter in the elf underground divine system, Cain's emblem is printed on the sail. These self-proclaimed, druzzy, degenerates use their long swords to cut off the skin and flesh of innocent people, enjoying their screams, and helplessness to the fullest. Lynch thought he would be afraid of this bloody scene for the first time, but the fact is that the blood actually ignited the lizard's hunting instinct. Lynch wished he could jump forward immediately, engage in slaughter, and satisfy the lizard's instinctive desire for battle. But he held on to himself, he didn't want to die inexplicably. The lizard in the bushes silently completed the encirclement of the elves, and a faint, imperceptible hissing sound sounded. Lynch understood the meaning of the hissing, it was a command to attack. The lizards born in the same group have an extraordinary understanding among themselves, and they have a set of encrypted communication methods with each other. The lizards rushed out from the vegetation and rushed towards the dark elves, while the lizards on both wings quietly pounced on the stunned crossbowmen. Lynch and other lizards located in the front have already knocked down some Duruzi who didn't have time to react. Lynch frantically stabbed his spear at the elf he had pinned under him, and his compatriots crossed over him, charging towards the other elves who had reacted. Time and time again, the elf had been pricked by Lynch, its flesh and blood blurred, and its strong power completely overwhelmed the elf's powerless struggle. The other lizards had already started slaughtering efficiently, but Lynch was still blindly tearing them apart. An arrow broke through the air and flew towards Lynch, who instinctively blocked the hidden arrow with a shield. Feeling the impact from his left arm, Lynch finally realized that he had completed his first kill. Amidst the howls and screams of the elves, Lynch stood up to observe the battlefield. When he found that the remaining elves on the pirate ship had aimed their crossbows at the shore, Lynch's heart jumped violently. Without flinching, the fiery fighting spirit drove Lynch to make the decision to charge. He carried a shield and crossed over a human captive lying on the ground, covering himself with corpses. He formed an array with more than 10 lizards who also rushed towards the pirate ship, covering each other and piercing through the formation of Druzy. The crisp sound of the crossbow heralded the arrival of death, and the lizard beside Lynch was shot away by a pair of people with shields. The crossbow arrow penetrated its body, but the tenacious creature struggled to continue fighting after landing. Lynch quickly approached the pirate ship and, as he was at the forefront, he naturally encountered a roll call from the crossbow. Amidst the intense sense of crisis, Lynch only had time to lean slightly and dodge the key points. In the muffled sound, Lynch was thrown into the sky with tremendous force, then fell heavily and was nailed to the ground. The intense pain almost made Lynch lose his sanity. Lynch roared and stood up, pulling himself out of the crossbow. A thick blood hole appeared on Lynch's stomach, where broken scales mixed with blood and flesh. The cold-blooded anger left Lynch with the power to fight, but the consequences of doing so were obvious. Lynch quickly called out the renovation panel he had seen before and chose supernatural resilience. Start of renovation, the warm sensation calmed Lynch, as he guarded against the pursuit of crossbows on the ship. The other charging lizards have boarded the pirated ship and engaged in slaughter, losing long-range support. The defeat of the elves is already predetermined. Lynch's wound gradually healed at a visible rate to the naked eye, with new scales covering the flesh and blood. Renovation completed, Lynch joined the battle again and became familiar with his body through combat. He should have been good at combat because he was a lizard. In the process of tempering, Lynch's killing efficiency is getting higher and higher. Hardly resisting the attacks of the elf swordsman with his hard scales, Lynch's spear advanced and decisively dealt with the enemy. The faint local accent stopped Lynch. There is no Mandarin in this world. God bless. Sigma bless. I really don't want to die. Lynch calmly approached a pile of corpses and, after repelling the incoming dark elves, he asked in the same language in a low voice. When did you come? The male voice below the pile of corpses paused, and then his excited head popped out. After noticing Lynch's appearance, the hope in his eyes was instantly replaced by fear. Grass. Lynch glanced at him, making him understand, and smirked, saying, Brother, you look like this. Lynch pushed back the fleeing dark elves and quickly spoke. There's no time to explain. After killing these elves, you will also be killed. Take your people with you and don't make any aggressive gestures, they will be prioritized and killed by us. Lynch turned his head and continued to join the fight. The man was stunned and hurriedly crawled out from under the body, rushing towards the ship while shouting in language that Lynch couldn't understand. The other surviving humans left the shelter and followed the man to escape to the merchant ship. Lynch inadvertently blocked other lizards, allowing them to focus on chasing fleeing elves rather than unarmed humans. The call from behind made Lynch slightly divine. My name is Fong Lu. I will introduce you to others. Goodbye. Others. The human merchant ships cut off their chains, set sail, and the lizards who completed the slaughter did not pursue them. They just silently gather together and return in the direction of the past. At the time of departure, there were only 90 of the 100 lizards left, and the ones who died were all those named by the crossbows. Lynch knew that there would be more and more battles like this. There will be no more lizards from other battle groups to add, and this batch of lizards will become fewer and fewer until they all die. Alternatively, if there are lizards who have survived the trials of war and survived decades or centuries of fighting, wandering alone in the rainforest, then they are Scar veterans. In the end, everything will be destroyed and die in the end brought by ancient enemies. In order to protect this world, even the lizard people who have gone through thousands of years of warfare must have the consciousness to sacrifice their lives. Almost all lizard people died in war. This is Ruthenia, a fortress against the enemy of chaos, constantly engaged in battles far beyond the imagination of mortals. Lynch doesn't know how far he can go. He wants to see the world outside the rainforest, take risks, and be praised like a legend. Even growing up to be able to resist evil gods and rewrite the ending of the end. But first of all, he must survive and use his special abilities to enhance himself, becoming a survivor in battle. A shadow fell on Lynch, who looked up and saw a huge winged dragon carrying a spirit lizard flying towards the temple city. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Storm approaches. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Storm approaches. Lynch returned to the city, and the road was already filled with a scene of slaughter. One by one, the lizard battle groups walked on the spacious road, and the small towering lizards no longer carried stones and bricks. They held giant hammers and formed an array with spirit lizards riding armored dragons and triangular dragons. The noisy spirit lizard was shouting loudly. For Kotago. Kill the invaders for the big plan. That's the call of the Lord of Sun City. Lynch's battle group merged into the silent lizard army, and the army slowly moved towards the northeast direction. From the noisy words of the spirit lizards around him, Lynch roughly understood the reason for the army's gathering. The rainforest scout discovered an army of undead spirits wandering on the east coast. Near the Ashes city of Powakos, 10 unknown orc tribes ravaged the rainforest. Unfortunately, the subspace gap in the northern echoic city of Zahuatak was opened up, and a terrifying demon led a demon army to appear in the rainforest. Lord Mazdamudi of the Sun City of Hisoda, the oldest surviving Ceylon, issued its decree. A group of soldiers will be drawn from various temple cities to intercept the enemy, and Lynch's army will face the undead before supporting Echo City. If the threat of green skin had not been lifted by then, they would have to go to war with the savage orcs. The rainforest is quiet and silent, no longer as noisy as before. This silence is a dangerous omen, which means there is a terrifying predator preying on it. Lynch looked at the ancient blood lizards riding on the Tyrannosaurus Rex in front of them. The mounts of these commanders were dinosaurs transformed by the ancient sage, strong and cunning. Lynch and his compatriots marched together for several days, occasionally stopping to feed their hunger with mosquitoes. Fortunately, Lynch found that his taste buds were very dull, otherwise he would really not be able to accept the dark cuisine of the spirit lizards. A headless giant dragon resembling a spiny-backed dragon but with a forked tail emerged from the bushes beside Lynch, and its owner was a spirit lizard nagging from the gods. Lynch had already smelled it and its rider, it was a cave-dwelling dragon. If I guess correctly, then the spirit lizard is a divine oracle, also known as a prophet. Lynch did not show any abnormality. The spirit lizard priest and the prophet were both eyes of Slam, and Slam could even cast spells through them. This spirit lizard seems to be different from other prophets and has an abnormal activity. It rode on a cave-dwelling dragon, passing by Lynch's queue, with its sharp and mysterious voice announcing. The legacy of the great ancient saint, the lost Asherenka, is in the near future. The prophet's round eyes seemed to glance at Lynch unintentionally. Failure is the beginning of rebirth, and the time of destiny has arrived. The seal of Asherenka will welcome its voters. In the high scream of the spirit lizard, the sky suddenly darkened, and there was no more sunlight penetrating the gaps in the tree canopy. The winged dragon riders dancing in the sky shouted a warning to the troops on the ground, and the sound of some giant flying beast flapping its wings in the wind could be heard clearly under the tree canopy. Lynch and his fellow countrymen formed a formation and, under the command of the ancient blood warriors, rushed towards the trees on the east side with the rest of the lizard battle group. Lynch was flanked by a group of only 10 lizard warriors, who appeared to be even larger than Lynch. Under the command of the ancient blood warrior, different lizard battle groups cooperated, and each group coordinated their own way to address the shortcomings of attack and defense. Lynch's regiment will serve as a left-wing assault force, attracting firepower for the cold lizard riders and cooperating with them to defeat the invaders. The roar of the artillery made Lynch even more uneasy, as the shell landed on Lynch's right side and killed 3 unlucky Thuras. More of them were the lizards affected by the impact, who crawled up after landing and continued to move forward as if nothing had happened. In a series of shelling, Lynch and his comrades had already discovered the enemy. That is a corps composed of dead people, with living dead people with skin and bones attached to their bodies holding firearms or crossbows, shooting at lizards such as Lynch. The sturdy shield shielded Lynch from damage, even if the musket hit him, it only made his body slightly stiff. The pterosaur in the sky was entangled with a huge bat, and the black clouds summoned by the spell covered the sun. The zombie waved its sword in an attempt to stop the lizards, but it was only in vain. Lynch easily smashed the zombie sailor who dared to block him into pieces. As the spear swung, Lynch and other lizards escorted these restless undead into eternal sleep. Explosions, hoarse curses, the roar of the deceased, and the roar of giant beasts mingled throughout the battlefield. From time to time, swollen corpses rushed in, fought fiercely for a moment, and then exploded, frying Lynch's face with meat crumbs. Lynch was surrounded by fewer and fewer lizards, and his body was also covered in blood. The cold lizard rider took the opportunity to circle around the enemy's rear and directly silence the cannons. On the front battlefield, teams of armored undead were crushed by charging dragons. Victory is right in front of us. The piercing spell sounded again, and just hearing it made Lynch feel a chill. The world seemed to remain silent for a moment, and then a gap opened in mid-air. It devours everything around it like a black hole. Before it could move to Lynch's area, the spell vortex began to shake, indicating that its controller was unable to guide this spell. The unexpected casting of spells is extremely dangerous for the caster, and it's not good news for Lynch either. The darkness suddenly expanded and devoured a group of lizards and undead, including Lynch. In the midst of earth-shattering, Lynch saw a dazzling array of colors, as if there were ruins of dilapidated buildings in the glow. The next moment, Lynch felt the air again, but he was in darkness. Lynch's night vision ability provided him with assistance, which seemed to be an underground cave. The spell just now forced him to undergo a spatial transfer. There are some outlines of buildings in the cave, and Lynch approached it and found that it was a temple building located underground. The symbols engraved on the wall were scratched by some creature, and Lynch became wary. He lost his weapon in the explosion, but he still had sharp claws and teeth. Lynch walked silently in the tunnel, and not long after, he discovered some upright little mice. They chirped and shouted, and from time to time, rodents attacked and killed their companions, sharing their flesh and blood with other rodents. Some mice twitched their noses in confusion, and they smelled a different smell. A stick-shaped object surrounded by the corpse of a rat caught Lynch's eye. It has intricate patterns, slender like a spear, and topped with diamond-shaped crystals, resembling a scepter. There is a prominent line of markings under the crystal, just like the finished product being stamped. Kotago. This is the taboo of the ancient sage who symbolizes the sun. Undoubtedly, as a lizard, Lynch has legal ownership of it. But to have it, Lynch has to face these greedy and despicable rat people. A slightly heavy footsteps rang out in the distance, and a giant rat-shaped monster several laps larger than Lynch appeared in Lynch's sight. Lynch was confident that he would retreat completely under the siege of thousands of rodents, but he had no confidence in facing a rat troll alone. Moreover, he has no weapons. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Surprise. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Surprise. Lynch made a decisive decision and rushed directly towards the Kurtigo staff before the rat troll approached. Countless crimson eyes in the darkness looked at the sudden disruptor, and when they found that the opponent was weak and powerless, the bloodthirsty side of this group of rodents was stimulated. At the end of the passage, the deformed and swollen arms of the rat troll fell to the ground. Compared to the shorter arms, the legs began to accelerate and rushed towards the unwelcome guest like monkeys. The monster's charging steps echoed in the tunnel, but Lynch's first challenge was the small and agile slave rat. The oncoming rat man was torn into two pieces by Lynch's sharp claws, and this violent and bloody scene caused the other rat men to pause slightly. Lynch pounced on the situation, his sharp teeth biting the timid rat man in front of him, and his claws cutting open the necks of the rat man on both sides. The rough dagger on the rat man's hand couldn't pierce Lynch's scales, and occasionally hidden weapons sliced open the scales. However, Lynch's terrifying self-healing ability allowed the wound to heal in an instant. The air was filled with a strong stench, and many rodents began to retreat with secretions produced due to fear. The blood ignited Lynch's hunting desire, and he sniffed the timid aura in the air. Lynch did not stop at all and continued to charge towards the ancient relics. Lynch only killed a dozen or so rodents, and seeing the enemy irresistible, they began to flee. At first, the rat man, who was about to face Lynch, turned around and fled. The rat man behind saw his companion in front of him escape and did not want to face the enemy directly, so he also turned around and left. The rat man in the rear mistakenly thought that the rat pack had been defeated and hurriedly took a shortcut to evacuate. In the end, 1 belt is 10, 10 belts are 100. The panicked rat man even blocked the charging path of the rat troll. They would rather face this monster than Lynch, but the next moment they were crushed into flesh by the monster. Lynch grabbed the Katego scepter in the pile of corpses and felt a delicate metallic texture as a warm sensation spread from his palm to his whole body. A cold will collided with Lynch. Does it excite the solar nucleus? The strong wind from the rat troll left Lynch with no time to think, and he agreed to the request directly. Clear sunlight escaped from the diamond-shaped crystal at the top of the scepter, illuminating the tunnel. Unclean and evil dissolve in the sunlight, but mutated creatures like rat trolls are not chaotic demons, fearless of purification. Touch. The rat troll's fist, thick as a bucket, fiercely flew Lynch onto the rock wall, causing him to spin around and slide to the ground. The second hint of the scepter arrived late. Start melting and cutting. Lynch felt like his whole body was about to fall apart, with a fishy smell in his breath. The reinforced panel reappeared in front of him, leaving him temporarily unable to pay attention to the request for the scepter. Current potential development rate. 15. Current affixes. Rebirth, enhancement selectable. Lynch found that self-healing ability can still be enhanced, but he cannot unlock further enhancements now. So Lynch didn't hesitate to choose to strengthen and transform the scales. Amidst a burst of itching, Lynch faced the rat troll's sandbag-sized fist and heard a system reminder in his ear. Successful renovation, touch. Lynch tried his best to turn over and avoid the blow, but cracks had appeared on the stone wall that had taken the damage on his behalf. Current affixes. Rebirth, heavy armor. Lynch, relying on his strong resilience, stood up and stimulated the melting and cutting of the scepter. The crystal at the top of the scepter lit up a dazzling blue arc, rustling in the air. Undoubtedly, it is the black technology of the ancient sage. The rat troll charged towards Lynch again, its dull brain devoid of the word fear. Lynch watched helplessly as it collided with the Katego scepter, its massive body being cut open by laser melting. With a relaxed swipe, Lynch split it in half. The broken body fell on both sides of Lynch, and the crystal began to flicker restlessly. Lynch stopped activating the scepter, which should be a solar melting device that has been underground for a long time without replenishing energy. The superstitious spirit lizard may think that it needs to be supplemented by the ancient holy divine power, but Lynch can deduce based on experience that taking this thing out to sun and recharge it is enough. Although in the eyes of the spirit lizard, the sun is the embodiment of the power of the ancient Saint Katego. The ancient sage had already set the program, but the lizard people who had lost their inheritance gradually deified it. Lynch did not stay in place, and those fleeing scarven rats may bring reinforcements. Once the number of rodents reaches tens of thousands, timidity will be replaced by some kind of mystical confidence. That means Lynch has to kill thousands of rodents to repel them, which is enough to exhaust Lynch alive. Perhaps you can try strengthening your endurance next. Lynch walked through the tunnel, paying attention to the traces on the ground and moving towards the direction with fewer remaining traces of the rat man. In this process, he once again had the idea of disabling himself and strengthening himself in a nesting doll style. Rationality ultimately prevented Lynch from putting it into practice. Who knows how the panel is judged? If it harms itself and doesn't admit it, wouldn't it have been beaten up by itself for nothing? More importantly, the current environment is not safe, and serious injuries may lead to irreversible accidents. The sound of flowing water appeared in the deep cave, indicating the presence of an underground river. Sniffing the water vapor in the air, Lynch had a reference point in the intricate tunnel. The water vapor became increasingly strong, and Lynch could already hear the sound of rushing water. This is good news, the flowing water may be able to take Lynch to the exit. Setbacks always come unexpectedly. Lynch turned the corner and was stopped by a closed door. The texture of the door is completely different from the murals on both sides, it appears smooth and exudes a metallic luster. The irregular patterns covered the walls, fortunately confirming that it was not a creation of the rat man. This is not the style of the rat man. The rat man worships their rat god, and 13 is the sacred number of the bighorn rat. The blasphemous number runs through various fields related to the rat man's life. This is not a secret stronghold of the rat man. Lynch can make a judgment based on it. Just as Lynch was examining the patterns on the door, it suddenly slowly opened, but what caught Lynch's eye was not the road ahead. The faint yellow light leaked out, illuminating the tunnel. The light yellow crystalline material is interspersed with an amber narrow elliptical shape, vividly reflecting Lynch's figure. A chill surged straight up Lynch's brain along his spine, even the sauropod's cold thinking had a slight shake. If I guess correctly, this is the pupil of some kind of creature. Enough to have the size of a truck's pupils. It looked at Lynch with a hint of confusion, the ground trembling slightly, and its pupils sinking downwards. The sound of the giant object entering the water stirred up huge waves, splashing onto Lynch and causing him to stumble. The pupils had disappeared, and an endless dark river appeared in Lynch's sight. A huge vortex was gradually dissipating. Where is this an underground river? It's clearly the underground sea. The sea flowed majestically underground, but just now the unknown monster had already helped Lynch make a choice. This road is blocked. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Assault. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Assault. Lynch retreated to the fork in the road and chose another path to continue moving forward. The temple-style architecture disappeared and was replaced by scattered stalactite forests. There is no imprint of the rat man on the rocks, and there is no scent of the rat man in the air. Lynch remained vigilant, silently weaving through the stalactites of all sizes. There is no absolute thing. The rat clan named Eisen is skilled in assassination, and the absence of rat traces does not mean that there is no rat. Maybe there will be assassin Eisen hiding in the tunnel. The rat man has always been the biggest threat to Ruthenia underground, and Lynch had to be wary of these despicable creatures. The cowardly slave rat cannot pose a threat to Lynch, but the special rat man is no less than the elite of other races. Moving forward, the rock on the right disappears, and along the coast lies the unsettling underwater sea, with even seawater flowing into the rocky forest. Lynch waded through the shallow water, facing a messy stone mill, and further away, there were fireflies emitting green light. Amidst the strangely shaped stones, numerous slender figures made Lynch stop. Lynch crawled behind the pile of stones, his cold eyes recognizing the other person's identity. A group of dark elf raiders. Unlike the pirates they encountered before, these Druzy are more well-equipped and even have 3 female sorcerers holding wands. The leading dark elf held a long whip in his left hand and a spear in his right hand, wearing a comical pointed helmet. Of course, to those victims, this is not ridiculous, as the cruel soul beneath the bullet-like helmet is enough to be feared. Lynch is not afraid of them, he has never looked down on the scum who takes pleasure in bullying the weak. If there were a team of Thuras by his side, Lynch would dare to rely on the terrain to ambush these foolish hot-blooded creatures. But he was alone. Even if he could kill the leader of Druzy, he would still die at the hands of other elves. Unlike the Scarvans, organized Druzy is more difficult to escape. Killing the leader of the Rat Man will cause the Rat Man to disperse in a panic, while killing the leader of the Dark Elves will only make Druzy desperate and desperate. Druzy, who left his leader and fled, would face harsh punishment upon returning to the Dark Elf society, and it would be better to die decisively. If they can kill the murderer, they can gain forgiveness from the Witch King and be accepted back into the Dark Order of Druzy. Hundreds of elves gradually approached Lynch's position, their torches illuminating a large underground cave, and from time to time, Dark Elf scouts returning from exploration joined the queue. Lynch could hear faint sounds of communication, but he couldn't understand Elven language. Omelin was very frightened as he lost the beast dedicated to the Great Witch King. Although the Witch King disappeared in the recent war, no Druzy would question his power and authority. The Lord of Fear in Crocoland is no exception. If Omelin fails to retrieve the beast, the respected lord will skin Omelin for the Witch King. It's all because of those inferior Asur. Can't they just huddle in Ojuan and wait for the arrival of the army of Druzy? Cain was up, and the sea lords of Azza seemed to have gone crazy, attacking Druzy's slave ships everywhere, and even the island-like Black Ark on the sea was destroyed. I hope that Admiral Masika can attract the attention of the Ocean Lord and give Omeran enough time to retrieve the beasts that escaped in the battle. Of course, it would be even better if he were killed by that Ocean Lord. That Asur is like a Duruzi. Omelan was happy to see his enemies die at his hands. There have been some unsettling comments circulating in the team, and Omeran executed a shadow that fueled the situation, but he dared not exert any more pressure. The shadow swordsmen are all fugitives, and Omeran cannot be certain whether they are loyal to him or not. Perhaps they would be happy to let Omelan face failure and give way to other trainers with higher chips. Glancing at the advanced female sorceress surrounded by the speechless spearmen, the sorceress Teresa became impatient. It seems that she wants to immediately return to Crocoland and then face the wrath of the fearless lord with Omelan. Omelan knew that she was the eyeliner of the damned supreme warlock Moras. Even if the Witch King goes missing, he will not be loyal to that disgusting witch. Who knows if that great king is hiding in the dark waiting for the betrayer to appear on his own. Lynch quietly took a detour, preparing to avoid this group of dark elves. The complex stalactite forest on the left is like a maze, and Lynch can only cautiously follow the water vapor in the air to avoid losing his direction. There are also many scattered dark elves exploring the stone forest with torches. Fortunately, the flames exposed their location from a distance. The dark elves of this world are not underground creatures, they still lived on an island called Ojuan during the first Chaos invasion. After the Chaos left, the higher elves engaged in an internal battle, splitting into two parts that were enemies of each other. Lynch finds it difficult to understand their thinking. The chaotic enemy still dominates the world, but their short-sighted infighting consumes the power to resist demons. There were more and more wandering dark elves, and Lynch stopped behind a stalactite, feeling somewhat conflicted for a moment. Ding! The sharp blade protruding from the darkness struck the scales on Lynch's neck, and the crisp collision drowned out the sound of water flow. Lynch turned around on guard but didn't see anything. There seems to be invisible enemies in the shadows of the rocks. Fortunately Lynch has strengthened his scales before, and his tenacious vitality will provide Lynch with extremely high fault tolerance. Lynch has already guessed that the Dark Elves don't have this ability. An assassin of the Eisen clan, there is no doubt that only the short and agile Scarven rat can make such an unintentional attack and instantly disappear. If Lynch is an alien species in the spirit lizard, a hidden master chameleon, then he can easily target with hot vision. But Lynch is a lizard, and his keen sense of smell cannot smell the assassin's body. The ancient sage underwent multiple renovations, all of which were cold-blooded species, but the sauropod lost its ability to perceive heat and was replaced by more refined sensory enhancement. Lynch listened to the faint footsteps. In addition to the footsteps of the dark elves in the distance, there was a fainter sound. The sound of surging waves in the underground sea affected Lynch's judgment, and he couldn't pinpoint the target for a moment, or even determine if the other party had already circled behind him. I hope these dark elves are not colluding with the rat man. It is highly likely that there is no connection, otherwise those elf swordsmen holding torches should have surrounded them together. The enemy is dark and we are clear, but a faint confrontation has formed. Assassin Eisen was very cautious. After discovering that he couldn't break through the defense, he stopped raiding and just kept wandering, interfering with Lynch's judgment. In the sound of breaking through the air, a poison dart approached Lynch in the blink of an eye. This undisguised attack naturally put Lynch on guard. He rolled on the spot and dodged the darts. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Not talking about martial virtue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Not talking about martial virtue, but the purpose of the dart was not to kill Lynch. The hidden weapon hit the stalactite above, and the intense sound echoed incessantly underground. Lynch listened to the footsteps of the rat man rushing away and looked at the dark elves rushing around, feeling a little surprised for a moment. This is the perfect reference for causing trouble in Shuidong, and there is no way to prevent it. It always has a way to create other movements and attract Druzy. Lynch quickly fled towards the depths of the stone forest, and the dark elves vaguely blocked the area, so Lynch inevitably collided with a shadow swordsman. Lynch charged fiercely towards him, but the swordsman skillfully avoided and blocked Lynch's path with his long sword. Lynch used a scepter to stab the elf, claiming it was a scepter, but in reality it was more like a spear. The crystal at the tip of the spear is not inferior to meteorite, and the leather armor on Shadow's body is penetrated as if it does not exist. Dark Shadow was forced to turn back to defense, but dared not pull back. Lynch's scepter is longer, and the distance is even more unfavorable for Shadow's performance. He can only turn around and narrowly avoid the fate of being pierced by the scepter. He saw that Lynch had no intention of fighting, so he deliberately procrastinated. Shadow relies on her flexible body movements to entangle with Lynch, and her sword skills, both virtual and real, are incredibly exquisite. Lynch didn't care about the fancy moves in his flowers, he just swept his staff across. Shadow took the opportunity to strike Lynch's left shoulder with all her might, preparing to take advantage of the spear's lack of dexterity in a narrow environment and take the first step to defeat Lynch. Sparks splashed everywhere, and the long sword got stuck in Lynch's scales. The heavy blow from the staff hit the body of the Shadow, which had exhausted its old strength and had not yet gained new strength. The shocked Shadow was thrown out by Lynch and hit a sharp rock. After several attempts, it was unable to get up again. Lynch pulled out the sword stuck on his left shoulder and threw it at Shadow, continuing to run without looking back. Taking advantage of his ability to see at night, Lynch successfully got rid of a group of elves. But as time passed, the lingering sense of weakness made Lynch extremely uneasy. He seemed to be poisoned, and the dark Shadow smeared poison on the sword. Fortunately, Lynch's strong physique and enhanced self-healing ability saved his life. He needs to find a safe place to rest and replenish some water. At the same time, he needs to think about how to improve his status. He can't be trapped underground forever, he always has to think about how to accumulate strength after going out. The society of the lizard man is highly rigid, and it is difficult for Lynch to cross social classes unless he can find information left by the ancient sage that is clearly beneficial to him. If it's really not possible, we can only prove ourselves by killing the enemies of the lizard man and let Master Slam take a look at Lin Chigao. Skaven. In the dark cave, dense red eyes moved towards the Druzy. Omelin looked at these inferior races with disgust, causing the sorceress to send a magical signal and summon Druzy to gather. When the resounding bell echoed underground, and the rat flock surged in all directions like locusts. The screams of the dark elves were incessant in their ears, and the soon-to-return Druzy was instantly engulfed by the tide of rat people. In the chilling sound of chewing, the second bell rang. When the advanced female sorcerer, with the help of the other two female sorcerers, raised her wand and guided the magic. A spark was blown out by the female sorcerer, and the flame quickly drifted towards the group of mice, transforming into a huge flame head in the blink of an eye. The flames laughed and ignited all the rodents along the way, creating a path of flames. But this is just a drop in the bucket, flames engulfed in an endless swarm of mice. When the resounding sound of bells approached, like the rampant slave rat in front of Omelin. They were so numerous that all slave mice believed that the rat pack was invincible, and with only a few hundred Druzzies under Omelin's command, they could not repel the enemy. They seemed to have accidentally entered the territory of the rat clan. The speechless, next to the female sorcerer silently walked to the front line, attempting to contain the Scarven frenzy with shields and spears. The slave mice driven away by the clan mice collided with these well-trained Druzzy, and although the formation was on the verge of collapse, they still held on firmly. The rat pack is not limited to slave mice. The piercing funeral bell rang again, and the plague monk mixed among the slave mice excitedly shouted the blasphemous name of the mouse god. The fanatical plague monks were almost insane in the sound of the bells, and some of the rodents blocking their way were slaughtered like enemies by these strange rodents filled with diseases inside. They devoutly chanted hymns of praise to the horned mice, accompanied by creaking chants, as the plague monks headed straight towards the silent forest's cold spearhead. The decaying body of a plague monk is fearless of pain, and so is the numb, speechless. The machete dismembered the spearman's body, and crossbows and spears also pierced through the filthy body of the rat man. The plague monk mixed in the rat flock laughed wildly as he broke through the defense line and engaged in even more bloody hand-to-hand combat with the shadow swordsman. Even if they are killed, the scattered foul-smelling bodily fluids are enough to make the enemies of the horned mice meet their cowardly gods. In the rear, the black sharp crossbowman was splashed with sticky juice, and was scalded by corrosive liquid, losing his combat effectiveness on the spot. The screams from both sides of the enemy and us actually ignited more desire for killing among the rat people. Even if he died, the filthy body of the plague monk achieved his goal, and the disease began to ravage. Omelin held the bone whistle on his chest, his face gloomy, and he had to show his cards, otherwise these useless peers alone would not be enough to think he was dead. The piercing whistle was overshadowed by the fifth chime, but Omelin's little pet had already received the signal. The already unstable surface of the underground sea became increasingly turbulent, and a sea snake-like monster emerged from beneath the surface. It has a dragon-like head, and its short wings indicate its lineage, although they are more like fish fins. This is a sea dragon. The sea dragon wriggled its massive body and stepped ashore to welcome the group of mice. With each move, it could kill more than 10 rodents. Omelin's face looked even worse. This sea dragon was hopeless, and the plague of the rat man would devour its life. Sorceress Teresa once again guided the wind of magic, but a strange will interfered with her spells. The backfire caused by the failed spell cast resulted in terrifying burns on the female sorcerer's body. The sixth bell rang, and Teresa's second glance could already see the horned rat man sitting in a small mobile clock tower after the group of mice. Omelin took out another bird-shaped bone whistle and blew it again. Not long after, a scorpion-tailed beast flew in from the darkness. Omelin quickly climbed onto the scorpion-tailed beast, and Teresa, along with other female sorcerers, also squeezed in. Omelin hesitated repeatedly, but ultimately acquiesced. He dared not kick the followers of this supreme sorceress. Omelin abandoned the other druzzies and directly steered the scorpion-tailed beast away from the battlefield. The remaining dark elves fell into despair, with some druzzy shouting Cain's name in the dying slaughter, and more elves fleeing in fear. The bell rang a total of 13 times, and everything returned to silence. The Grey Prophet Burrell was very angry, as he had bought a rat troll from a corrupt clan at a high price and it had become 2 halves. The slave mouse brought detailed information. It was a good thing done by a lizard thing. Burrell killed all the fleeing slave mice, but this did not quell its anger. It bought the head of the lizard from the assassin of the Eisen clan, and Burrell was interested in weapons that could easily cut open the body of the rat troll. Useless slave mice, they should have told Boreal earlier that dangerous stick is a treasure. The howling funeral bell stopped beside the corpse of the sea dragon, and Boreal looked coldly at the giant beast being devoured. How dare these foolish elves search for treasures under Boreal's nose? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Black 13. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Black 13. Lynch hid in a cave and drank some water dripping from the stalactites. Not long ago, he heard the ringing of bells in the distance. It seems that this place is no longer safe. After Lynch's weakness disappeared from his body, he set off again. In the following days, Lynch did not face any further threats, but he could always feel inexplicable surveillance. The assassin of the Eisen clan never dies of a thief's heart and has been searching for an opportunity to kill Lynch. During this period, Lynch was lucky enough to catch a few fish, which provided him with enough energy. The structure of the cave became increasingly simple, and in the end, only a wide road remained. After walking along the uneven rocks for several more days, Lynch discovered a bridge in the gentle water flow. It is 20 to 30 meters wide, and under the mud, there seems to be a layer of rock, like a shallow beach just out of tide. Some unlucky fish and shrimp are trapped in puddles. Lynch thanked the water god Zongchi and ate these natural gifts along the way. The chilly gaze behind him reappeared, and Lynch swaggered through the hundreds of meters long shoal to the opposite bank. After confirming the safety of the other side, Lynch sat on a stone and quietly looked back in the direction when he came. Seemingly unable to bear Lynch's provocative posture, several darts flew from the opposite side and were accurately intercepted by Lynch. A rat with a sharp blade in hand, not yet as tall as Lynch's thigh, rushed over in the blink of an eye and jumped behind Lynch. The cold light of the dagger pierced Lynch's eyes from behind, but was cleverly blocked by Lynch's staff. The slender tail of the rat man rudely pulled towards Lynch, and on its sharp blade, the pale green venom made Lynch dare not be careless. He pushed the rat man aside while using the end of his scepter to face the tail blade. The rat man's body twisted eerily in mid-air, and its tail blade curved in an incredible arc, reaching into Lynch's eyes like a venomous snake. Lynch closed his eyelids, turned his staff back on defense, and the tip of his staff, unwilling to be outdone, stabbed the rat man, trying to force him to give up this sinister attack. If it weren't for the rat man changing his tactics and dodging at the last moment, Lynch would have thought he was a fearless warrior who would trade his life for his life to take Lynch. If that venom can really kill Lynch, the tail blade struck the staff, and Lynch's strong strength blended with the explosive blow of the rat man, creating a crisp and loud sound. The rat man was knocked away by a tremendous force, and in mid-air, he used his strength to jump into the distant rocks, hiding his figure and preparing to use his advantage of wandering to launch another surprise attack. Its employer has become impatient with waiting. It is a high-ranking Grey Prophet, the leader of the newly emerged Severed Tail clan, who is also highly respected among the Grey Prophets. It really wants to continue cautiously searching for opportunities, but if it continues to procrastinate, the Eisen clan should send an assassin rat with a higher status to kill it and take over its commission. The shallow beach in front of Lynch seemed to tremble for a moment, and then Lynch realized that it was not an illusion. Huge waves rose on the water surface, and the shallow shoal sank into the water, causing it to shake violently several times. Mud is scattered in the waves, making the entire water area turbid and unbearable. Both Lynch and the rat assassin stopped confronting each other, and Lynch felt a sense of familiarity as he watched the scales resurface from the water. The irregular patterns reminded Lynch of his experience on the day he first went underground, and then he associated it with his impressive giant eyes. No mistake, that unknown giant beast ran here to rest. Its semi-floating body accumulated mud in its slumber, forming the bridge Lynch had just walked over. Two yellow searchlights lit up underwater, projecting onto the shore. Lynch sniffed the smell of fear in the air. It seemed that the timid mouse was also frightened. Lynch slowly retreated, far away from the shore, and the body of the giant beast alone was over 100 meters long. Lynch couldn't imagine how big it was. Fortunately, it seemed to have no appetite for the tiny Lynch, only the annoyance of being awakened. This is even worse, I hope it doesn't hold any grudges. Wow! The slender and flat tail of the giant beast stirred up a rough wave and threw it at Lynch. The huge waves surged into the cave, and Lynch decisively embedded his scepter deep into the rock, securing himself, which made him withstand the impact of the waves solidly. Fortunately, Lynch's strength was strong enough. Although his whole body was sore from being pushed by a huge force, Lynch was not carried into the underground sea by the flowing tide. The unlucky Scarvan assassin screamed helplessly in the tide. Even though it was a skilled assassin, it could not withstand the terrifying power of this disaster. The rat man shouting on the water seemed to attract the attention of the giant beast, curiously observing the tiny rat man. Scarvan was startled and secreted a dirty liquid, causing the giant beast to lose interest and suddenly sink, swimming towards the distance. The tides caused by the giant action carried away the rat man, and Lynch watched helplessly as it was crushed to death in two colliding waves. The surging waves gradually calmed down, and Lynch moved away from the water in shock. Burrell was frightened and moved away from the imprint on the stone platform, as a mouse cub from the Eisen clan infiltrated its secret altar. Has the assassin Eisen who accepted its commission failed? Did the notorious senior assassin die? For a moment, Burrell wanted to terminate the commission, but the Eisen clan was clearly not a vulnerable group to be controlled by the mouse. The new assassin has already taken away half of the dimension stones from the final payment of Burrell's collection on his own. By identifying the marks left by him, Burrell determined that he was a member of the most elite assassin organization in the Eisen clan. It's a Black 13. Burrell leaned uneasily against the rock wall, nervously examining the darkness. There is no doubt that the newcomer is a master among the masters. You should know that if you want to retain the title of Black 13, you must always ensure that you are at the top of the Eisen clan. The price of failure is death. The Night Lord of the Eisen family will not pity the lives of his subordinates. In order to satisfy him, he must constantly improve his skills and reach the pinnacle of his abilities through repeated assassinations. In the entire family, only the Night King himself and the Death Master have a higher status than Black 13. Black 13 is a secret organization. Burrell was once a member of the Patriarchal clan. The highly esteemed Grey Prophet clan stands out among the 13 councils. It wavered between the Epidemic clan and the Parliament during the Civil War of that year and gained a lot of benefits. If it weren't for that, it wouldn't have understood this mysterious organization either. Burrell began to fear that the lizard thing that could counter-kill high-level assassins must be a special baby spirit among lizard people. Is it sent by those big toads to collect artifacts? If it dies underground, will it disturb those sleeping toads, making them think that the Plague clan has returned to Luskia? The Broken Tail clan will be liquidated by the Snake God Messenger. No. Before that, Burrell will leave Luskia with his baby and head to the old world. Establish a new clan. Greed has taken over its mind, and now the only thing to worry about is whether that Black 13 will secretly take the treasure. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Clash. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Clash. Burrell was struggling in his heart, and he had a way to make Black 13 obediently abide by the agreement. But it's easy to ask God, but difficult to give God away. Its support is not so easy to use. The light of the dimensional stones shade green reflected on Burrell's gray-white hair, leaving only half of his tail anxiously sweeping. In the end, this powerful sorcerer convinced himself to believe in his wisdom. Burrell pressed the mechanism, left this secret stronghold, and arrived at the center of the clan territory through a complex tunnel. Tens of thousands of slave mice were mercilessly slaughtered under the command of Burrell. One by one, the plague monks followed Burrell's instructions and drew huge sacrificial symbols with fresh blood. Burrell chewed on the dimensional stone and engaged in unknown communication with the terrifying demon in the chaotic realm. Unexpectedly, the disaster lord named Chlorich was exceptionally generous, not only fully supporting Burrell's plan, but also promising a better future. Burrell knew there were traps hidden inside, but false peace was better than blatant malice. The fragments of the dimensional stone were scattered in the symbol of the altar, and Burrell knocked on the dimensional stone, preparing to cut open the curtains of two worlds and let the messenger of the great horn rat come. Burrell's nerves were tense, and he prayed nervously to the horned mouse. The great demon who came may not be the one it designated. The bloodthirsty and terrifying demon, the cunning and treacherous guardian of secrets, the treacherous and ever-changing demon lord, the impure and impure one, and the followers of other chaotic gods are all great demons. If Burrell were lucky enough to summon the great demon of the four gods, it would be a disaster. Although they may be more powerful, those terrifying beings wouldn't mind easily pinching Burrell. The influence of the Chaos Four Gods on the demon realm is unparalleled, and this is highly likely to occur. Burrell sensed a massive figure appearing in the darkness, and the vast magical currents tore apart the real space. The Grey Prophet, who was shivering all over, stopped the spell and was definitely not a follower of the Bighorn Mouse. It's too late, Burrell's mind is blank. It saw fragmented continents sinking and floating in the darkness, islands with sharp teeth gnawing on each other. It saw the plague spreading on the ground, with decaying corpses filling the town with human toys. It saw a bloody world, with countless ferocious demons fighting in it. It sees all kinds of things and their ultimate fate. Blood flowed from Burrell's eyes, and the Grey Prophet waited for the judgment of fate in pure fear. A corrupt figure from a disaster lord appeared on the altar. Looking at the hideous and twisted long horns of the corruptor, as well as the decaying skin, Burrell felt a bit confused for a moment. Chlorage. The Grey Prophet trembled and raised a question, while the unknown demon with the appearance of a disaster lord grinned and looked down at the small rat man. Your future is not here, the broader stage has already opened up. Yes, for the sake of the rat god, I will personally lead you to harvest the fruits of victory. Two different whispers appeared together. One of them had a sharp and piercing tone, while the other had a deep voice that was familiar to the corrupt prophet, who was clearly lying. Burrell shrank his body, his ears tightly pressed against his head. Yes, yes. The Grey Prophet responded with cowardice and lowered his head. The shadow cast by the demon made it feel uncomfortable all over, and it wished to escape immediately. The demon let out a terrifying scream, and Burrell looked at the constantly changing shadow, slowly closing his eyes and tightly closing his glands. The shadows on the ground are shaping in distortion, with two slender necks, huge bird wings, and a massive humanoid body. This is a ever-changing demon. Burrell has been deceived, and its backing has never been a disaster lord, but a cunning demon disguised as a corruptor. Angered without being played with, Burrell respectfully followed the instructions of the ever-changing and dedicated the entire clan to this terrifying demon. The Grey Prophet survived and learned about the demon's name. Although it has guessed that only one mutator has two heads. It is Carlos Weaver, the chief demon of cunning. The Grey Prophet, who was sent by demons to the old world, was both scared and grateful, and had a hint of joy. This ever-changing demon lord is more generous than the disaster lord, and the complex magical knowledge is the reward that the Grey Prophet receives, but this is just the beginning. It's not a big deal. Burrell couldn't help but think so. Isn't this better than greeting those disaster lords who are subordinate? It doesn't mind continuing to obey Chlorage, although it's useless if it does. Has the ever-changing person considered its will when sending it back to the old world? No. It's just an insignificant rat man. The Grey Prophet prayed for the forgiveness of the horned rat, while ambitiously planning to use the power of demons to secure a seat in the 13th Council. A passing farmer happened to see a rat man laughing wildly under the shade of a tree, and the Grey Prophet looked at this human thing in a secluded manner. It had not been hands-on for a long time. Lynch fiercely smashed his scepter towards his back, and his thick tail swept along with the flow. At the next moment, a mouse wrapped in black cloth jumped to one side and dodged Lynch's attack. Lynch turned around and wanted to continue his attack, but the rat man threw his small sword at an incredible speed. Before Lynch realized it, the rat man's dart was directly embedded between Lynch's eyebrows. The rat man pounced like a ghost, bypassed the waving scepter, and struck Lynch's neck with a knife. The blade penetrated into Lynch's flesh and blood, and the rat man underestimated Lynch's defense. Seeing that Lynch's head could not be directly cut off, the rat man gave up his weapon and a few jumps disappeared from Lynch's sight. Lynch's wound began to discharge pus, accompanied by symptoms of local necrosis. A series of hidden weapons attacked from different directions, and Lynch persevered through the trauma and jumped directly into the underground sea on one side. I can no longer care about that giant beast. This Ratman assassin is not as fast as a mortal, and Lynch is not its opponent. Fresh blood attracts some carnivorous fish, but Lynch is even more fierce. He pulled out the hidden weapons and blades from his body, and while sinking, he tore at the school of fish to replenish his energy. Lynch called out the panel, and as expected, all the enhancements lit up again. Current potential development rate. 20. Current affixes. Rebirth, heavy armor, enhancement selectable. Lynch quickly found the enhancement related to toxin immunity and began to strengthen and transform in a state of numbness throughout the body. Successful renovation, current potential development rate. 25. Current affixes. Rebirth, heavy armor, negative state exemption. Lynch was pleased that this entry not only increased his resistance to toxins, but also included other negative effects. The influence of toxins was eliminated, and Lynch's strong self-healing ability played a better role. Not long after, all the wounds that looked shocking healed. Lynch surfaced, and just as he poked his head out, he hit a hidden weapon. Lynch directly pulled out the hidden weapon, and when he climbed ashore, the wound had already healed. The assassin in the dark no longer blindly attacked, and Lynch dared not be careless because his sense of crisis had not yet dissipated. It must have special means that could threaten Lynch's life. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Never be defeated. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Never be defeated. The rat man swiftly surrounded Lynch, jumping between the stones. Lynch kept changing his position, trying not to expose his back in front of the rat man. Click and wipe. A round ball was thrown at Lynch by the rat man, and Lynch swung his stick to hit it far away, but was stopped by a dart that followed closely behind. The dart hit the stick, causing Lynch to slow down a beat, which was enough to make the ball complete its mission. Under Lynch's restless gaze, a roar sounded, and the violent explosion caused the cave to partially collapse, burying Lynch underneath. The rat man flexibly moved away from the danger zone in the chaos, but it did not leave. It must ensure that its target dies and prevent other creatures from disrupting the situation. Under the rocks, Lynch was shrouded in blood and flesh, and the flames restrained his recovery ability. The oxygen is decreasing, which is more deadly than Lynch's injury. Lynch called out the panel again. Current potential development rate. 25. Current affixes. Rebirth, heavy armor, negative state exemption, enhancement selectable. Lynch was searching for useful modifications, and an affix called deoxygenated life forms came to his mind. This will free him from the constraints of oxygen on life. At a certain moment, Lynch stopped breathing. Successful renovation, current potential development rate. 30. Current affixes. Rebirth, heavy armor, negative state exemption, deoxylated life form. Lynch waited quietly for his injury to heal, and after some time, he pushed aside the rocks on his body, ready to fight again. In the darkness, Black 13, who was waiting for work, looked at Lynch crawling out with some confusion. It has to admit that this lizard thing is its most tricky target so far. But it still has a way to kill this seemingly undead monster. Black 13 pulled out a black dimensional stone blade with a notch, which was a good thing it had obtained from the Scori clan. It is a special short sword formed by mixing metal and dimensional stones, which can easily break through the armor of the Dwarf King. It is sharp enough, but not strong enough. Black 13 almost lost it in a previous commission. The tenacious Dwarf King was able to launch a near-death counterattack even when he was seriously injured. Black 13, who had no time to dodge, used a dimensional stone blade to forcefully connect with the dwarf's hammer. This caused it to be damaged, which made Black 13 feel heartbroken. Fortunately, the dwarf thing was too weak and its strength was far inferior to before. Dimension stone blades cannot be used as conventional weapons, and carrying them carries great risks. Dimension stones are highly toxic and radiating. The addiction caused by long-term consumption of dimensional stones by rodents makes them indifferent to these dangers. Dimension stones are so useful that they are added to both precious armor and rare talismans in the rat society. This kind of stone with powerful magical power is the most precious currency. Black 13 looked at the short knife with some reluctance for the last time. The reward for this mission is very generous. Perhaps you can go to the Scori clan to find an engineering sorcerer to get a dimensional stone blade. Before Lynch fully crawled out, Black 13 jumped up to him and cut open his throat with a short knife. It almost chopped off Lynch's head, if it weren't for Lynch hastily using his claws to force Black 13 to defend. When Black 13 jumped back, he didn't forget to use his tail blade to create a terrifying wound on Lynch's arm. The sudden heavy blow almost drove Lynch crazy. He rushed towards the rat like a beast, attempting to kill the assassin with his teeth and claws. Fortunately, Lynch's sanity was quickly regained, and he quickly picked up his weapon and defended against the wall after forcing the rat man away. Lynch took the opportunity to open the panel and start a new strengthening transformation, and this time he chose the term, full of energy. It is foreseeable that if the rat man assassin does not give up on the assassination, it will be a long battle. Black 13 pursued and relentlessly used various hidden weapons to shoot at Lynch's wound. Lynch blocked these attacks with his hands, but it almost caused his palm to be cut off by the elusive blade. The speed of wound healing this time is far slower than before, and there are constantly discarded flesh and blood falling down. His immune system also has its limits, even after being strengthened. Dimension stones have a more sinister and terrifying power than venom, and are more difficult to be eliminated by pure living organisms. After leaving behind the necrotic flesh and blood on the ground, Lynch managed to survive the most dangerous period without any danger. Black 13 certainly won't sit by and watch Lynch recover, it occasionally quietly launches attacks. Due to Lynch's focus on protecting his throat, he followed suit by cutting open a slender wound on Lynch's stomach. Lynch has to admit that he was largely intentional. This is a perfect opponent, it cannot instantly kill Lynch, and Lynch is not afraid of heavy damage, and even looks forward to it. Waving his scepter to repel the rat man, Lynch opened the panel again and chose to strengthen his reaction ability. His explosive speed is not actually slower than the rat man, but his reaction is too slow. Current potential development rate 40, current affixes. Rebirth, heavy armor, negative state exemption, deoxygenated life form, abundant stamina, extraordinary agility. Lynch noticed that the rat man's movement slowed down. No, it was Lynch who became faster. Using his staff, he blocked the dimensional stone blade that the rat man was attacking from the left side. In the rat man's mournful gaze, the stone blade was shattered by the sturdy scepter. Lynch has no intention of keeping it, belittling the enemy is self-destructive. The rat man deftly retreated, and Lynch did not chase after it. When it was focused on escaping, Lynch could not catch up with it. The rat man then made a detour and threw down several darts, but was narrowly intercepted by Lynch. When it was determined that Lynch was not blocking his attack with good luck, but rather getting stronger as he fought, Black 13 began to waver. But the pride of the assassin master makes him unwilling to give up. It also has methods, it always has skills to kill targets, just like in the past. Black 13 has no experience of failure. If it gives up, it will become the first Black 13 to assassinate and fail. This is an indelible shame, even if it is killed, it cannot wash away the stain of the Eisen clan. Taking a deep glance at Lynch, Black 13's figure disappeared into the darkness. It will come back, for the only pitiful dignity it has left. The conflict came to an end, and Lynch looked in the direction of Black 13's departure without much concern. He has already defeated this assassin once. Lynch will only grow stronger. Why fear a mouse that can only survive in the shadows? Sooner or later, Lynch will encourage the lizard man to attack the demon city and personally eradicate these dirty creatures. The lizard people will once again begin the Great Purge, like they did 10,000 years ago. With the scepter of Kotago, Lynch no longer fears being recognized by Slam, and the relics of the ancient sage have proven his reliability. He only needs to prove that he is qualified to master the sacred objects. And then, it was when he found a way to make Slan actively interfere with the world. Lynch continued to advance along the underground coast, and the caves in this area were not interconnected with each other, they were all dead ends. He had to face the sea that intimidated him and explore along the coast. Okay, I'm not too scared either. Lynch just doesn't want to die because it's unclear. The aftermath of dying from monster actions has no honor to speak of. That massive sea beast can create a terrifying natural disaster just by flipping over unintentionally. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. War Mobilization. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 War Mobilization. A grand thought interrupted Lynch's thoughts, and he thought it was a deity casting his gaze. The cold and organized thinking declares. Lizard people. Prepare weapons for war, ancient enemies have descended again. The idea of distorting the mountains swept across the entire continent, and countless lizards simultaneously received this command. Lynch clenched onto the Katego scepter, which was an important message being directly conveyed by a certain Slytherin. The situation is so urgent that it has awakened Swan, and even issued orders beyond his authority. Usually, the spirit lizard priests who serve Ceylon interpret the low murmurs of the demon toad sleeping, at most they themselves speak up, and then the spirit lizard priests pass instructions step by step. It is obvious that the enemy is so powerful that the demon toads who can foresee the future do not want to waste any time. Lynch prayed for his fellow humans on the ground, as there must have been a large-scale demon invasion. Luskian Isthmus, the top of the central pyramid in Hisoda. Lord Mazdamudi projects his thoughts around the world. Not long ago, at the other end of the world pond, the newly formed kingdom united to defeat its great enemy. In order to protect the world, the demon toads have been working hard for over a decade to strengthen the Great Guardians, and weaken the demon's power, indirectly providing them with help. The demon toads were supposed to continue to bless the Great Guardians, but only the younger Lord Ediatego revealed his prophecy. This ancient second-generation Slam, the ruler of the moon city of Taraxlan, and the most outstanding moon chamberlain, saw the hidden crisis approaching Luskia. Lord Mazdamudi looked towards the shattered continent to the north. In the north, self-deprecating elf cubs enter the rainforest on a large scale, and these foolish hot-blooded species are searching for things they should not touch. The ancient demon toad did not pay much attention to them. He blocked the army of Druzy in the Grey Guardian Mountains that rose 1,000 years ago, and they could only harass various temple cities like mosquitoes. The brother race of the lizard man is still in civil war, and Mazdamudi remains silent about Osur's crossing out of Ojuan, which may push for the implementation of the big plan. Decades ago, Mazdamudi received a pair of gifted Osur, and the elf mage convinced this creature who had assisted the ancient sage in transforming the world. On the other side of the big pond, in the old world, the dwarf countries of the World's Edge mountain range are fiercely fighting against the green tide formed by the convergence of green-skin orcs. The underground magic mice are restless, even if they have just encountered several catastrophic failures. Traveling north along the towering mountain range, passing by the newly ravaged kingdom of Kisrif by the chaotic army. Mazdamudi cautiously threw his will towards the northern peninsula, and the claws of the chaotic enemy gathered once again. Heading south, crossing the cold strait, wild animal warfare ravages the imperial forest, casting a shadow over the southern nations. Its mind swept over the mountains, crossed the ocean, and finally returned to Luskia. The Slans are working hard to close the chaotic rift that suddenly appeared in Zahuatak. At the same time, on the vampire coast, the restless dead cub began to stir again. The wild orc tribes in the south migrated together towards Hisoda, and Mazdamudi could see the shadow of the conspiracy. As the demon toad's mind swept across the ground, a massive unknown creature underground caught its attention. That may be a precious species that existed before the arrival of the ancient sage, because the knowledgeable demon toad had never seen anything similar to it. Lynch silently offered his respect to the cold-blooded beast lord and the ancient Saint Iki, hoping that this would prevent him from being noticed by the giant beast that suddenly surfaced from the underground sea. When it rises, the entire underground sea rises several zhang with it. It writhed and struggled in the waves, and after a natural disaster, the giant beast regained its composure. The pale yellow giant eyes inexplicably showed a cold rationality, and Lynch looked at the other person's lizard-like head, hiding behind the stones and not daring to move. The flat and sturdy tip of the fish's fins, like sharp claws that can easily crush a pyramid, protrudes from the water and grasps a certain point across from Lynch. The ground began to shake, with patches of dust collapsing and sunlight falling. After finishing all of this, the giant beast shook its head, and the indifference in its eyes was regained by wildness. It was half floating in confusion in the water, as if unsure of what had just happened. After a moment, the island-like monster sank into the water, creating a huge vortex. Lynch stared blankly at the distant sunlight, as if his underground journey was coming to an end. But he needs to find a way to reach the other side, which requires crossing at least 1 kilometer of underground sea. Lynch now has a strong resistance towards the entire underground sea. Along the coast, Lynch began to move again, attempting to take a long detour and reach the opposite side along the rocks. After trekking for 3 days, Lynch followed an irregular curve along the coast, leaving at least half of the way to the hole on the ground. The howling of the wild beast caused Lynch to stop, as if some kind of tragedy was happening ahead. Lynch crawled forward and soon saw the Druzy trainer he had seen before. There will no longer be any other Druzy guarding this beast tamer. Only the animal trainer and 3 female sorcerers remained, with the leading female sorcerer still having burns on her body. A ferocious scorpion-tailed lion was roaring incessantly at the giant lizard bound by shadows, which even made it ignore the new scent. That lizard is the size of an adult Tyrannosaurus, covered in thick fish scales, and has huge gill covers on its cheeks, making it look like some kind of aquatic sea lizard. The scorpion-tailed lion can only be considered a baby in front of it, but its emerald green pupils are filled with fear, which makes Lynch quite puzzled. The trainer kept whipping it with a magical whip, causing it to emit waves of mournful cries. Its gaze occasionally swept over the 4 dark elves, and as it passed by the ragged sorceress, Lynch felt a strange feeling with a hint of greasiness and obscenity. It's not an illusion, does this thing seem to have wisdom? The giant sea lizard couldn't suppress its anger in the whipping, making strange noises and forcefully climbing up, but was suppressed by 3 female sorcerers using magic. When it was pressed to the ground by magic, Lynch clearly saw in its eyes that there was nothing to love. The trainer's whip broke its dorsal fin, and only the constantly wriggling flat tail proved that it was still trying to resist. The giant sea lizard bulged its muscles in its forelimbs, and Lynch thought it was going to fight back to the death. However, he saw it extend its right paw, with its 3 toes slightly bent, and with some difficulty, straighten the middle toe and erect a non-standard middle finger. Lynch's eyes were slightly frozen, and this humanized gesture seemed to be his. The Dark Elves clearly did not recognize it as Lynch's previous international friendly gesture. Tamer Omelin may have been exhausted from the fight, or he may have thought that this cold-blooded monster's strange posture was a sign of submission and stopped the beating. But Omelin didn't let his guard down. This damn beast became particularly cunning 2 months ago. Even knows how to pretend to obey, and then take advantage of Azza's attack on the Black Ark, jump into the ocean and escape in the charge. Seeking follow. Up reading, end of this chapter.